The day he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You'll leave here with nothing," I took a deep breath and thought, "We'll see who ends up with nothing in the end." Those words echoed inside me like a cruel verdict, as if all the years I had dedicated, every sleepless night, every silent sacrifice meant absolutely nothing. He believed he could erase my life with one cold sentence, but deep down I knew the truth could not be stripped away that easily. Keys slammed onto the table, papers torn apart, his gaze steady as if he had already won. That was the moment my fight began, because it was never just about houses, accounts, or possessions. It was about me, about the woman he thought he could reduce to nothing. To the outside world, life with him looked like the perfect picture of stability. The community saw us as the model couple, the family others admired. He had the polished image, the charming smile, the reputation of a man everyone respected. But behind that facade, there was an invisible ledger. Every bill I paid, every sacrifice I made to keep our home standing, every time I put the needs of others before my own. I was the one holding it all together, yet none of it had my name on it. Every accomplishment was recorded under his identity, every contract signed by him, every receipt dismissed as unimportant details that, later on, would become the very proof of my existence. He told me not to worry, that we were in everything together, that trust was the foundation of marriage, and I wanted to believe him. How many times, like so many women, did I confuse stability with love? How many times did I silence my own instincts because I was too busy keeping everything from falling apart? He was a master at hiding his true intentions behind sweet words, and I, too, committed to preserving the image, ignored the red flags that were screaming for my attention. But everything shifted the moment I heard that phrase, "You'll leave with nothing." It was as if he had finally dropped the mask. He didn't see me as a partner, but as something disposable, someone whose history could be rewritten at his command. I felt betrayed not only as a wife, but as a human being. And the question that haunted me was this: if someone tried to erase your entire story in a single day, what would still be truly yours? Those words didn't break me. They fueled me. They ignited something he never expected to face, my refusal to disappear quietly. I gathered every piece of paper he left behind, turned every forgotten receipt into ammunition, transformed each memory into a weapon. Every tear became fuel, every insult became proof. And in that courtroom, the place where he was certain I would collapse, my voice finally carried the weight it always deserved. Because when someone tries to strip you down to nothing, that's the very moment you discover just how much strength you really have. If you've ever felt someone try to take away everything you built, hit the like button now and subscribe to the channel. This story might open someone's eyes, and together we can remind women everywhere that their strength is far greater than the lies they've been told. And now I want to ask you, what was the turning point in your life when you realized you had to rise up and prove your worth? Share it in the comments. Your transformation might be the light someone else needs to finally break free. From the outside, our marriage was the dream people whispered about. Neighbors admired the way we greeted each other in public. Friends said we looked like the perfect team. And even strangers would smile at us during church services as if we were living proof that love could last. He played his part so well, chivalrous, attentive, charming in all the right moments. I played mine too, smiling through the exhaustion, hiding the quiet loneliness that crept in late at night when the house was silent. People saw the surface, but surfaces can be polished lies. We had the big house that seemed like security, cars in the driveway that sparkled on Sundays, vacations carefully photographed to post for everyone to admire. What they didn't see were the invisible cracks forming between the walls. They didn't hear the silence at dinner, the excuses that kept him busy at work, The way my voice slowly stopped mattering in decisions about our life. They didn't know how many times I stayed awake wondering when the version of him I first met, the man who once held my hand as if I was priceless, had disappeared. I carried the weight of admiration from others like a crown made of glass. It looked beautiful, but every step cut into me. Women asked me for advice, saying they wished their husbands were more like mine. Men envied him, calling him lucky to have such a loyal wife. But the truth was that loyalty had become my prison. I thought stability was love. I thought providing was enough. I thought silence was strength. I convinced myself that this was what a good wife did: keep the house standing even if she herself was collapsing. At gatherings, I stood beside him, smiling when he spoke about our future plans, nodding when he made promises I knew he wouldn't keep. I laughed at his jokes even when they stung. I complimented his achievements while mine were brushed aside as just responsibilities. Every time someone said, "You two are perfect together," I swallowed the bitter taste of reality and forced myself to believe it too. After all, who was I to question what everyone else saw as flawless? But deep inside, doubt was quietly growing. There were the distant looks when I entered a room, the late nights explained by vague meetings, the subtle comments about my appearance that felt less like affection and more like reminders of what I wasn't anymore. He had a way of turning every question I asked into an accusation, every need I expressed into evidence that I was ungrateful. And so I learned to stop asking, to stop needing, to stop being. That's how he wanted it: me silent, me invisible, me nothing more than a shadow propping up his reputation. And the community adored him. They called him respectable, generous, the kind of man anyone would want as a husband or father. They didn't see how he slowly erased me from our story. They didn't notice how every achievement was framed as his success, even when my hands had done the work. They didn't care to look beyond the surface, because the surface was shiny and convincing, and I let it be, because I was afraid of what would happen if the illusion shattered. There is a question that haunted me for years: how many women sit in rooms filled with laughter, carrying heartbreak no one sees? How many of us wear the mask of perfect marriage while inside we are screaming for someone to notice? I know I wasn't the only one, and perhaps that is why I kept going, believing that endurance was noble, that suffering quietly meant I was strong. But endurance without love is just slow death. And I was dying a little more each day. The world envied our life, but envy is built on illusions, and illusions eventually collapse. I knew even then that the cracks were too deep to hide forever, and yet I stayed. I stayed because the fear of leaving with nothing felt greater than the pain of staying with lies. Until the day he proved just how disposable he thought I was. Now I want to ask you, how many times have you mistaken admiration for love? How many times have you hidden behind stability, afraid to admit the truth even to yourself? Tell me in the comments. Your words may be the mirror someone else desperately needs to see. It didn't happen overnight. Masks rarely fall all at once. They slip, slowly, piece by piece. Until one day, you realize you are no longer looking at the person you thought you knew. For me, the unraveling began with little moments, so subtle that if I dared to point them out, he would laugh and accuse me of imagining things. But deep down, I knew what I was seeing. There were late-night calls he took in the other room, his voice lowered to a whisper as if words carried weight that I wasn't allowed to hear. There were text messages he would quickly delete, brushing off my questions with a smug smile and a cold "Don't be paranoid." There were unexplained trips for business, always when I needed him most. Always when the children had school events, or when I simply longed for companionship. At first, I convinced myself that this was stress. Men under pressure acted differently, didn't they? That's what I told myself, because the alternative was too terrifying. To admit that my perfect husband might be living a lie would mean admitting my entire life was built on sand. And so, I silenced my intuition. I folded my doubts neatly into the corners of my mind, the way you tuck away old clothes you no longer wear but cannot bring yourself to throw out. But the silences grew louder. The excuses became lazier. And one day, he stopped, pretending altogether. I'll never forget the dinner party we hosted for his colleagues. I had cooked for hours, arranging the table like it was a magazine spread, smiling at every guest, pouring wine with grace. And then, in front of everyone, he laughed at me. Not a playful laugh, an ugly, cruel laugh that stripped me bare. He called me clueless for a comment I made, reducing me to nothing more than a punchline. The room laughed with him, but my heart cracked. That was the first time I saw how little he cared about preserving my dignity. After that, it became easier for him. Easier to dismiss me in public. Easier to criticize me in private. He started comparing me to other women, subtle at first. She takes such good care of herself, but soon sharper. Maybe if you tried harder, you'd look half as good. I swallowed every insult, but each one carved a wound into my self-worth. He wanted me to believe I was replaceable, that I was lucky he kept me around. And then came the day he stopped. Hiding altogether, I found the receipt in his jacket pocket flowers, expensive ones, but not for me. I confronted him, trembling, my voice barely steady. He didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "At least she appreciates me. You should learn from her." Those words were the blade that cut away the last threads of illusion. My husband, the man the world envied me for, had not only betrayed me, but wanted me to know it. The mask had slipped, and what lay beneath was uglier than I ever imagined. He wasn't the charming, devoted partner everyone saw. He was a man who thrived on control, who fed on my silence, who believed he could diminish me without consequence. And for a time, I let him. I stayed silent because I thought leaving meant losing everything. He made sure I believed that. But silence has a breaking point. And mine was approaching fast. I look back now and realize how many signs I ignored, how many red flags I painted white because I wanted the picture to look perfect. But perfection is the most dangerous illusion. It blinds you until betrayal is staring you in the face and you can no longer pretend it doesn't exist. So, I ask you, how many masks have you ignored in your own life? How many times have you looked at someone you loved and chosen to believe the lie because the truth was too painful? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be the lifeline someone else needs right now. There are moments in life that brand themselves into your memory, moments so sharp that even years later you can still feel the sting. For me, that moment was not whispered in secrecy or hidden behind closed doors. It was delivered to my face, with a cruelty so cold it nearly froze me where I stood. It was a Sunday morning. I remember because the light coming through the window was golden, soft, almost mocking. I had made breakfast, trying once again to hold on to some sense of normalcy, to remind myself of the family I thought I still had. I laid out the plates, poured the coffee, waited for him to sit down. He didn't. Instead, he walked past me, a suitcase in hand. I asked where he was going. He didn't even try to soften the blow. "I'm leaving," he said flatly. "And when I do, you'll have nothing." Just like that. No explanation, no pretense. Only a declaration. A warning meant to crush me before the war even began. My knees went weak, but my pride held me upright. He looked me in the eyes, daring me to fight, daring me to beg. But I didn't. I stood silent, my hands trembling against the kitchen table. He mistook my silence for defeat. He leaned closer, lowering his voice, as if savoring the venom. "The house, the savings, the car, they're all in my name. You think you built this life, but it's mine. You'll walk away with nothing but your clothes. And that's if I'm generous. Those words were designed to destroy me, to erase me, to make me believe I was powerless. But inside me, something stirred. A fire I thought I had lost reignited in that exact moment. Because what he forgot, what so many men like him forget, is that paper and signatures don't measure worth. Money doesn't measure resilience. He thought he was holding all the cards, but he had underestimated the one thing I still had: myself. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to crumble. But instead, I let him believe he had won. I let him walk out that door, smug and certain of his victory, because I knew something he didn't. Battles are not always fought in the heat of the moment. Sometimes, the strongest weapon is patience. But the betrayal wasn't just in his words. It was in his actions that followed. Within days, I learned he had been planning this for months. Accounts moved, property transferred, secrets hidden in plain sight. He had built a trap designed to leave me stranded, stripped of everything I thought was mine. Friends I thought were ours whispered behind my back, clearly already aware. And then, the final knife, I saw him in public hand in hand with the woman who had been living in my shadow. Younger, prettier. So he wanted me to believe. It wasn't just betrayal of a marriage. It was betrayal of trust, betrayal of years of sacrifice, betrayal of the woman who had stood beside him when he had nothing. I had given him my youth, my energy, my faith, and he thought he could discard me like I was disposable. But betrayal has a way of clarifying things. In that moment of humiliation, I realized something powerful. He may have planned my downfall, but he could never plan my response. He could never script the way I would rise. Still, I am not ashamed to admit there were nights I cried myself to sleep. Nights I clutched my pillow and wondered how a man I had loved could look at me and see only weakness. But those nights also sharpened me. Pain can either break you or mold you, and I chose to let it mold me. Every cruel word he had spoken became fuel. Every insult became proof of what I was fighting against. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and whispered, "You will not be erased. You will not disappear." And so I began to prepare, quietly, carefully. He thought I was broken, but I was strategizing. He thought I was powerless, but I was learning. He thought I would accept nothing, but he was about to see how dangerous it is to underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose. Because betrayal doesn't end the story, it ignites it. And mine was only beginning. Now I wonder, if you were told tomorrow that everything you built could be taken away, how would you respond? Would you crumble under the weight of betrayal? Or would you rise and fight for what is rightfully yours? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your answer might just inspire someone else to find their own strength in the middle of betrayal. Courtrooms are not like what you see in movies. They are colder, quieter, filled with the kind of tension that makes your heartbeat sound louder than it should. When I walked into that room for the first time, I felt the weight of every eye on me. To him, this was supposed to be the final act of humiliation, the place where he would strip me of everything I had built, where the system would echo his words, "You'll leave with nothing." But what he didn't know was that I had prepared. I had spent sleepless nights collecting documents, retracing steps, piecing together every hidden move he thought would remain invisible. I had found allies, two people he never imagined would stand on my side. And I walked in not as the broken woman he remembered, but as a strategist ready to face the battlefield he thought he controlled. The judge called the case, and there he was, smug, arrogant. With that same smirk he wore when he first told me I would lose everything. He leaned back in his chair like he was watching a play he had already scripted. For him, this was entertainment. For me, it was survival. The opening arguments were a blur. His lawyer painted him as the provider, the architect of our lives, the man who had given me everything and who now, generously, would let me go with dignity. They twisted my devotion into dependence, my sacrifices into weakness. Each word was a dagger, but I sat still, my face calm. Because I knew the truth was waiting, and when it surfaced, it would cut deeper than anything they could throw at me. Then it was my turn. My lawyer stood, firm and unshaken, and laid out the first piece of evidence. Bank statements he thought were buried, transfers he believed went unnoticed. The silence in the room was deafening as the judge scanned the papers. His smirk faltered just for a second, but I saw it. That flicker of panic, the first crack in his armor. We weren't done. Piece by piece, we unraveled the empire he thought he had built in secret. Property documents, hidden accounts, emails that betrayed his own arrogance. Each revelation wasn't just evidence, it was vindication. It was proof that I had been underestimated, that my silence had been mistaken for ignorance. And every time the truth landed, I felt stronger, taller, more alive. But the courtroom isn't just about evidence. It's about presence. He wanted me small, invisible, broken. So I sat upright, my head held high, every movement deliberate. I wanted him to see what he had created, the woman who refused to be erased. And I wanted the world to see too. The hardest moment came when I had to testify. They asked me about the marriage, about the sacrifices, about the betrayal. My voice shook at first, but then something remarkable happened. I looked across the room, saw his eyes trying to bore into me, and realized he no longer had power. My story wasn't his to twist anymore. It was mine to tell. And I told it every detail, every wound, every truth he thought I would bury. By the time I was done, the silence in the courtroom was not pity. It was respect. That day, the legal battlefield became something more than a fight over money or property. It became the stage where I reclaimed my voice. Every question, every objection, every ruling was a step toward independence. I wasn't just fighting for possessions. I was fighting for acknowledgement, for recognition, for justice. He tried to rattle me. He whispered insults under his breath, shifted in his chair, tried to break my focus. But it didn't work. For the first time, I watched him lose control, watched the confidence slip away. Because the truth is louder than any insult, and once it is spoken, it cannot be silenced. Walking out of that courtroom that day, I didn't yet know what the final ruling would be. But I knew one thing. I had shown him, and everyone else, that I was not the woman he thought he could destroy. I was stronger than he had ever imagined. And now I wonder if you were dragged into a battlefield where your dignity, your voice, and your entire life were on trial. Would you have the courage to fight back? Or would you let someone else write the ending of your story? Tell me in the comments, because your answer might just prove how powerful you truly are when the odds are stacked against you. Power shifts rarely happen in an instant. They build layer upon layer until one moment becomes impossible to ignore. For weeks, every hearing, every motion, every objection felt like a tug of war where he still believed he had the stronger grip. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the rope began to slip from his hands. And the first time I truly saw fear in his eyes, I knew the tables were turning. It happened on a rainy morning when the courtroom was quieter than usual. His lawyer stood to cross-examine me, confident, rehearsed, expecting me to stumble. They wanted to paint me as bitter, dependent, clinging to scraps. But when I answered, I didn't stutter. My voice was steady, my words sharp. I wasn't the timid wife they thought they could box into silence. I was precise, deliberate, unshaken. And then came the moment, the slip they couldn't recover from. My lawyer presented correspondence, his own emails where he bragged to a business associate about hiding assets. The words were his, the arrogance undeniable. The room shifted instantly. Even the judge leaned back, eyes narrowing as if the veil had finally been lifted. He had been caught in his own trap, undone by his own pride. And I watched his smirk vanish completely. That was the first real victory. But the true turning point was not about documents or testimony, it was about presence. Every time he tried to belittle me with his eyes, I met his stare head on. Every time he muttered under his breath, I held my ground. The more he tried to diminish me, the taller I stood. Slowly, everyone in that room began to see what I had become. Not a victim, but a force. One afternoon, during a recess, I walked past him in the hallway. He leaned toward me, his voice low and venomous. "Enjoy this little show. It won't last." I looked him dead in the eye and replied, "It already has." For the first time, he had no answer. The silence between us said everything. But turning the tables wasn't just about breaking him down. It was about building myself up. I had spent years shrinking, molding myself into what he demanded, living in the shadows of his authority. Now, every objection sustained in my favor, every piece of truth admitted into evidence, every supportive glance from people in the gallery added bricks to the foundation of a new version of me. A version that wasn't afraid, a version that refused to be erased. Then came his own testimony. Watching him squirm under questioning was surreal. For years he had controlled every narrative, spun every story, made me question my own reality. But under oath, under pressure, his stories crumbled. Dates didn't line up. Figures didn't match. Lies unraveled. The man who once made me doubt myself couldn't even keep his own fabrications straight. And with every contradiction, I felt the scales tip further in my direction. At one point, his lawyer tried to object so aggressively that even the judge reprimanded him. The frustration on their side was palpable. They had lost control of the narrative. Meanwhile, I sat calmly, not because I was untouched by the tension, but because I had finally learned the secret. Power isn't about noise. It's about truth. And the truth was on my side. The day the judge ordered a financial forensic review of all his accounts, I almost broke down in tears, right? That was the nail in the coffin for his arrogance. For years, he told me I wasn't smart enough to understand the money, that I didn't need to ask questions, that everything was handled. Now, the very system he thought would protect him was tearing through his lies, line by line. And I didn't have to lift a finger. It was his own greed that had set the trap. Every night after court, I went home exhausted but fueled. I would sit by the window, replaying the day in my mind, remembering the look on his face as his empire collapsed. It wasn't about revenge. It was about recognition. For once, people saw me, really saw me. Not the silent partner, not the invisible wife, but the woman who refused to disappear. And perhaps the sweetest part of turning the tables was this: he knew it too. He knew that no matter what the final verdict would be, he had already lost something he could never reclaim his control over me. So when I looked across the courtroom and saw him fidgeting, restless, desperate to regain the upper hand, I realized the game was no longer his to play. The power had shifted. The story was mine now. And it makes me wonder, if you were given just one chance to flip the script on someone who tried to erase you, would you take it, or would you let fear keep you small? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes the moment you claim your voice is the moment your entire life begins again. Freedom does not arrive like a sudden explosion. It seeps in slowly, quietly, until one morning you wake up and realize you are no longer carrying the same weight on your shoulders. The day the verdict was read, I didn't leap from my chair or cry out in triumph. I simply sat still, breathing deeply, as though I had finally been given back the right to exist. The judge's words echoed like a hymn I had been waiting to hear: fairness, independence, acknowledgement. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking out of a room empty-handed. I was walking out whole. But the victory wasn't measured only in legal terms. It wasn't just about property, accounts, or assets. It was about dignity. He had tried to strip me of everything, to reduce my life to a pile of papers that could be tossed aside. Yet I walked away with something far more powerful than money: proof that I could stand on my own. Proof that I had been underestimated, dismissed, and silenced for too long, and still, I rose. The first night after the final hearing, I returned home to a space that felt strangely new, even though I had lived there throughout the ordeal. The walls seemed to breathe with me, lighter, freer. I cooked myself dinner, sat at the table alone, and for once, I didn't feel loneliness. I felt presence, my own presence. The silence in the room wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. And in that silence, I realized what freedom truly meant: not the absence of responsibility, but the absence of fear. For years, I had lived on edge, wondering what mood he would be in, what words he would use to slice into me, what threats would be hurled my way. Now I could exhale without looking over my shoulder. I could walk through my own front door without bracing for a storm. That is freedom, the kind that money can't buy, the kind you only recognize once you've lived without it. Rebirth is not a single act. It's a series of small choices. I began with little things: rearranging furniture, planting flowers on the balcony, buying a lamp that filled the room with warm light. For years, he dictated everything from what color the curtains should be to what music was acceptable to play in the house. Now, every choice was mine. I painted one wall a shade of blue he would have hated, and as ridiculous as it sounds, I stood in front of that wall for almost an hour, smiling like a child, because it was mine. My decision, my freedom. The people around me noticed too. Friends who had drifted away during the marriage began to reappear, cautiously at first, testing if I was really free. And when they saw me standing taller, speaking louder, laughing without hesitation, they stayed. My laughter, something I had lost long ago, returned like a song I thought I'd forgotten. It wasn't forced, it wasn't polite, it was real. And with every laugh, I felt reborn. One afternoon, as I walked past a mirror, I stopped suddenly. For years, I had avoided mirrors, or when I looked, I only saw flaws, criticisms echoing in my mind. You're not enough. You're too much. You'll never be anything without me. But this time, I didn't hear his voice. I heard mine, and I saw not a broken woman, but a survivor who had endured and rebuilt. My reflection finally belonged to me again. The most surprising part of my rebirth was not the strength I discovered. It was the gentleness. I began to treat myself with a kindness I had never known before. No more pushing myself to exhaustion to prove my worth. No more apologizing for existing. I allowed myself rest, joy, imperfection. And in that gentleness, I found a strength far greater than any armor I had ever worn. And what about him, I know you're wondering. Did he ever apologize? Did he ever regret? The truth is, I don't know, and I no longer care. His story is no longer tied to mine. The day I walked out of that courtroom, I severed the last threat he had over me. He can live with his choices. I choose to live with mine, and my choice is rebirth. Freedom also gave me a new mission. I began sharing my story, quietly at first, with women who felt trapped, who whispered their fears in hushed voices. And each time I spoke, I saw the same spark ignite in their eyes, the spark of recognition. The realization that they too deserved more. That maybe, just maybe, they could rise as I did. And that became my true victory. Not just reclaiming my life, but showing others it was possible to reclaim theirs. Looking back, I see now that the courtroom wasn't just a battlefield, it was a birthplace. In fighting for justice, I gave birth to a new version of myself, stronger, wiser, unafraid. And though scars remain, they no longer define me, they remind me. Every scar is proof that I survived. Every scar is a mark of rebirth. So here I stand, free. Not because someone handed me freedom, but because I fought for it. And that is the kind of freedom no one can take away. Now, let me ask you, if you had the chance to rebuild your life from nothing, would you cling to the ruins? Or would you rise and create something greater? Tell me. In the comments, your story might just be the spark that inspires someone else to claim their own rebirth. Faith is not always built in churches or in the quiet recitation of prayers. Sometimes, faith is forged in the fire of betrayal, in the silence of loneliness, in the nights where the only voice you hear is the echo of your own doubt. For me, faith became the act of believing in tomorrow when today seemed unbearable. It was waking up with no guarantees, no certainty, and still deciding to move forward. Faith was trusting that the pain was not permanent, that the valley was not endless, and that light existed even if I couldn't see it yet. There were moments when I thought everything had been taken from me, my marriage, my dignity, even my sense of self. But now I understand that nothing eternal can truly be stolen. Love, dignity, hope, these live within us, and no decree, no betrayal, no cruel word can erase them. The only way to lose them is to forget they belong to us. And in remembering, we rise. Inspiration does not come from a perfect life, but from broken pieces rearranged into something beautiful. My story is not about a flawless victory. It is about a survival that became a rebirth. It is about looking into the mirror and no longer seeing the shadow of someone else's cruelty, but the reflection of a woman who chose to fight back with resilience and walk forward with grace. I did not win because I had more power, more money, or more influence. I won because I refused to let fear decide my ending. That in itself is the essence of faith. To step forward without knowing what waits on the other side, but to step forward anyway. There is a freedom that only comes after loss. The kind that teaches you that your value has never been tied to another person's approval, that your worth does not shrink because someone failed to see it. What once felt like destruction was actually transformation. The ashes of the life I lost became the soil for the life I was destined to build. And that is where inspiration is born, not in avoiding pain, but in enduring it and proving to yourself that you are greater than what tried to destroy you. I stand now in a place I once thought I would never reach, a place of peace, not perfection, not fantasy, but peace. And peace, I've learned, is the truest form of victory. It is walking through the storms and realizing they no longer control you. It is hearing the echoes of the past, but no longer being haunted by them. It is choosing to forgive not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve freedom. Every ending carries within it the seed of a beginning. My story is not unique. It is human. Betrayal, loss, justice, survival. These are threads woven into countless lives. But if there is one truth I carry, it is this: the story is not over until you decide it is. No one else gets to write your final chapter. No judge, no spouse, no betrayal has the authority to define your future. That power belongs to you alone. And so I share this, not as a monument to what I survived, but as a beacon for anyone standing where I once stood. You are not powerless. You are not invisible. Even in your weakest moment, there is a strength within you waiting to be uncovered. It might be quiet, it might be fragile, but it is there, and it is enough to begin again. Faith taught me that tomorrow is always worth reaching for. Inspiration taught me that scars are not shameful, they are sacred. They remind us not of what we lost, but of what we overcame. And I believe with every part of my soul that if I could rise from the ashes of betrayal, anyone can. So as I close this chapter, I extend a question to you. What does freedom mean to you? For me, it was more than a courtroom victory. It was the moment I stopped being defined by what was taken from me and started being defined by what I chose to build. Freedom was not handed to me. I claimed it. And so can you. If this story moved you, if it sparked even a flicker of reflection in your heart, I invite you to stay with me on this journey. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story so that others may find the courage to rise as well. And don't miss the next chapter. We're about to tell an even more powerful story of betrayal, justice, and redemption that will challenge everything you thought you knew about love and survival. You won't want to miss what comes next.